Psalm 126. We are in the Songs of Ascent. It's from 120 to 134 all summer. And what that is these are the psalms that the people of God would rehearse, sing, chant, probably clap on rhythm. I'm not sure how. We don't know a lot about the tradition, but we do know that this was what they would say to one another and around one another. And so I can't see the slides, but we'll figure it out. Psalm 126 is really brief, right? It's this brief story of God, or retelling briefly the story of God. But before we get into that, I want to ask you, what makes you happy? If we were to go around, you'd be like, we'd have themes. There'd be like dozens, but maybe not 100 different themes. They're like, oh, okay, that one's similar to that. Right? What makes you happy? Maybe a bigger question is, what is happiness? What is happiness? And that's kind of this existential, philosophical thing. And people through the centuries have been trying to define that. Now, in the modern day, it's generally thought of like the things that you like doing. And I think they had a little bit more depth as they thought about this in centuries past, because there was very little margin of time and health and life and money to do the stuff that you like doing, right? So I'm not going to talk about the good old days because I wasn't alive back then, right? I'm talking centuries ago. But happiness, as whether our forefathers of our nation or previous people would debate, or Jesus, he says, blessed are or happy are those in the Beatitudes, involves the good of other people, not just doing what you want. Now, I'm not going to get too much into the definition, because Psalm 126 doesn't define happiness, but describes it. And more than using the words, though I think some of those similar words of happiness, joy, are found in this psalm, I want us to think about what makes God happy and how does his people become happy in him. So you might have woke up today and be like, all we want to do is make dad happy. We're just eating bacon, right? Or whatever. Life in the family of God. This is life in the family of God. We as his kids obey him from our acceptance, not for our acceptance. This is a definitional thing. I just said I wasn't giving you definitions. I'm describing a way in which we can think about how we relate to God and even one another. We obey from our acceptance and not for our acceptance. In fact, part of why we begin with God and sing to God and end with God and come to the communion table together is to be like, God, you not only have accepted us, you have provided every opportunity for us to freely live as your kids. And we get to do that with joy and with prayer and with care. Now, Jerry and I are different in one way, is that I have long points in all of my slides, okay? I try not to make them a full sentence, right? Got some dangling modifiers there or whatever. I don't even know the parts of grammar. All right, here we go. Point 1. This is the beginning of Psalm 126. Our Father is happy when his children are free. Now, I think that is describing more or less what the first 3 verses are about, but I want the scripture itself to speak. We began our call to worship with these 3 verses. We'll do it again. Psalm 126, a song of ascents. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. Then our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with shouts of joy. Then they said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us. We are glad. I mean, it's one thing for someone to say to you, like, you must be really happy, right? Which is an odd thing, to like, you must be really happy about that. You're like, oh, it's another thing to just be happy without description, right? And so without, definition. Our mouth was filled with laughter. Our tongues were with shouts of joy. It's those moments that we try to capture with a phone, a picture, and it's like someone's like, put that down, just enjoy the moment, because it's candid, it's real. They really were like people who dream. Their mouths were filled with laughter, their tongues with shouts of joy. They had no thought about, how are we going to pay that bill? What's going to happen here? What's the future going to hold? This party's going to be over in hours. Someone's got to clean up after all of this, or whatever. What is the probable setting of what they're dealing with, right? When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. I believe that this psalm is rehearsing and retelling the time when they came back from captivity. There are three main times in the history of the nation of Israel they were in captivity. One is in Egypt, right? And two others, Assyria in 722 BC and Babylon in 586 BC. And you're like, I thought we weren't doing textbook history here. Okay, just done, right? If you were sent to captivity, or your cousins were sent to captivity, or you were the children or the grandchildren of the people who were in captivity, you would remember all that stuff. Not the dates, but what happened, right? And the more they would get removed from that time, they'd be like, oh yeah, we heard about that. Okay, what's for dinner? Right? And so what they would do is rehearse this time, not just to go back and be like, we had it real bad in the Depression, right? My grandma would hang up the phone at 59 seconds every single time. I timed it one time on the timer on the timer on the microwave, not running the microwave, but you'd have it on. It's like, hey, right, on the landline. I just wanted to know. And it wasn't that she thought of that. It's just you don't spend another 10 cents, right? She was in her 20s, the first time she bought clothes. Right? How did she have clothes before that? They made them all, right? And I love hearing those stories because I'm like, no way, as you're playing Rummy Cube, and you're just catching up. Like, no way, tell me more of those stories. The young people are hanging around with the older people and everyone in between, and they're not only listening to how the notes are sung and what the story's in, then they're asking questions. And the older people aren't just saying, well, you got it really good, we had it bad. They're just enjoying the moment as well, which is an unbelievable thing for the different generations to be together. Their mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with shouts of joy. This morning on the way to church, I visited with two of my boys, an elderly couple. I wasn't planning on this morning, but I realized it's Father's Day. They don't get out of their home much, and we were not able to visit on Fridays as we usually do. And Bill said, he goes, this is like Christmas. He's like, it's not Friday. I walked in and he wasn't ready, for us to be there. I won't describe the scene, but he's like, whoa, whatever. And I'll tell a little bit of story about him later. But they were just overjoyed. And I tell this story about this barn that recently burned down near where we live. And he's like, oh yeah. And he goes, I remember when that was built. And he's like, I was an old man when that was built, right? He's 93, almost 94. But then it's like, tell me more. And then he just rattled off, on the 23rd of April, this, this gym burned down. That was arson. I don't want to talk about that. But this one, this barn fell down in an earthquake and, all this stuff. And it wasn't details to him. It took him back, those memories, not just nostalgia, took him back to that place where he could talk about God's goodness to him. Like the Lord has been faithful in his life. And then he'd look over and he'd say, hey, Mom, which is his wife, Gail. And she'd just laugh. And the boys are kind of climbing around right there. And she's like, I don't have any cookies for you. It's not Friday. I was like, we're good. We have everything we need. My young one here, he really wants water. So we went and got that. And there was the joke about, we're going to start charging you for water and all that stuff, right? It's a beautiful thing when God's people are free, who feel like they can just be themselves around everyone else. And not just be themselves, but reflect God's kindness, reflect God's power. In fact, it became so obvious to the nations around them, verse 2, the Lord has done great things for them. Right? The nations, the surrounding nations were they were coveting the relationship that these people had with their God, and the Lord, who we don't know, has done great things for them. Probably in contrast to the gods we worship, has not. Right? And then it continues, the Lord has done great things for us, and we are glad. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are glad. Why do we sing these things? Why do we reply? Is the songs, is that a warm-up for the preacher? No. It's the best part. It's not just the songs. It is praising God. It is worshiping Him with our whole heart. And obviously all of life is worship, but that moment that we come together to remember the great things the Lord has done, to be uninterrupted by maybe other things. And even, I don't know about you, if I'm standing there, I know I came in late, back as we were singing, thinking about all kinds of things. You jot something down, and it's just that time with the Lord. But even right now, what great things has the Lord done for you? Not everyone had a court appearance that they had to wait, prepare months for and pray into that moment. But all of us have that moment where you're anticipating, God, you have to do this great thing for me. Those are the kinds of things we write down on our prayer cards. Those are the kinds of things that when we have a time to pray for one another, we stand up and go, you know what? God has to do something great for me right here, because I don't really know what's going on. Now, rumor has it, I don't think we had enough connection cards, so you might not have had one in there. Just write on your bulletin, tear it out, and we'll all remember that day. All right? We'll get more cards for the future. But expressing to the Lord, expressing to one another how He has done great things for us, what does that do for us? It reminds us. It reminds me. When has the Lord done great things for me? The Holy Spirit is teaching us through this psalm, and all the ones like it, they're all kind of similar, how to overcome our present adversity, which is real, by seeing it in the light of all of God's past faithfulness. The terrain of this situation, totally different. The unique people that He might bring into your life during this season might be different. The opportunity to respond, going, God, I know that you accept me as your own. I really need to see you come through for me right now, for us. It's new. And so we overcome our present adversity by remembering the past and praying for the future. But that's not just like a comment about the psalm, the structure of the psalm. That's actually how we live. When we live this way, our mouths filled with laughter, our tongues with shouts of joy, and we say, the Lord has done great things for us, and we list them out. Not going, I got to make sure I remember everyone, but they just come out. It gives us hope to actually expect God to provide much for our lives. And this next verse will probably make some of us uneasy. But let me give my point about it first. Point 2. Our Father is happy when His children are full. Now, I like a good meal. All you can eat is a dare, not a promise. $7.95 or whatever it was at the Chuck Wagon. Right? I remember my dad, we would joke that when he was alive, he could turn his plate back into the cupboard because it was so clean. And you could watch how he did it. Like the roll was the dozer that just kind of cleaned it up, and he's left-handed. And, when you grow up left-handed, you have to learn to do everything right-handed. But he went back to it, right? And he loved it. And he was like, well, I was the youngest of 4 boys, so I didn't know if this was my last meal or whatever. It's like, it's not that my mom wouldn't provide food or my dad wouldn't, it's just like my brothers would take it. But our Father is happy when his children are full. Verse 4, we'll read it in 2 versions here because I think it helps give the picture of it. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like streams in the Negeb. Like, what is that? Let's go with the next version. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, as streams renew the desert. If you look at the land of Israel, there's that wedge at the bottom. Don't have a map for you, but just like where everyone lives, and then there's that wedge at the bottom, and that's just desert. It's arid. It's just... You're out there, you better bring your provisions, you better have someone who's there for you, or it better be a time when rains have come and it's overflowing, an oasis. And everyone there, everyone singing these songs know that story of we remember when it was overfilling. We remember when it was like at flood stage in a good way. And everything was growing, and we were able to not only capture the water, but use it agriculturally to grow things. And this is where they would not only go and maybe vacation, but go and celebrate. You go up to the temple, of course, 3 times a year. All the men have to do that. But where do you go and do vacation when there's streams in the desert? Now, some people may have gone to that state south of us in the desert, and there's beautiful places out there, and you're like, how do they build this out here? It's like, well, the land's cheap, right? But there used to be a lot of water, and I'm not getting into the politics of it and whatever, but that water was used elsewhere, let's just say. Everyone loved having the water. Irrigate this, send it over here, whatever. But if there's plenty of water or plenty of whatever resource, you're not counting. You're not counting every drop. You're not thinking of it. And it isn't that you have too much or you're rich in the sense, but you know where the source of all that it comes from. And so you can be generous with the resources you have. But here's the expectation. Restore our fortunes, Lord, as streams renew the desert. Do for us what you did for us back then. What I loved about our impromptu testimony is it's current. I may not be able to describe all that God's doing in my heart or life in such a succinct and beautiful way. And you may not be able to this is exactly how this is. But in the middle of your story, if you can pause at any moment and take a slice of that and go, okay, I see where he's taken me here. I don't see the result. I have no idea the result. I'm not in control of that. I'm not judged for that. I don't know. But I know the direction we're going here. It's one of faithfulness. It's one of joy. It's one of laughter. It's with other people. I know that I'll get to the place where I'll say he has done great things for me. So right now, present tense, I think he's doing great things for me. Or for you. Actually, it's easier to say that about someone else. Hey, I've noticed this about you. The Lord is up to something. Oh, what do you see? Sit down. It's about growing in your character, growing maybe in your humility, especially growing in your joy. Whenever I'm happy around our home, the women in my house say, Dad, you're really happy, or you're really happy. And I was like, is this strange? And she goes, yeah, I'm just pointing it out, right? And it's those kinds of moments. Now, the Bible is filled with these agricultural scenes that I know I'm painstakingly talking us through, right? But we know kind of what drought is, and definitionally we're not quite in a drought where we live. But the rivers are low, the land is dry, there's not much snow on the mountains anymore, right? And the whole cycle of that is meant to show God's faithfulness, right? we know that winter will come back and there'll be rain. And we might not like that because we're like, bummer. But we're really glad that it happens because that's why it's green. And that's why in the Pacific Northwest, there's 1,200 species of moss, right? Right? That's why the weather is mild. But these rains, they come into these desert places and they become rushing rivers and they renew this parched land and they make plowing and planting possible, right? You ever try to dig in a dry, you're like, does someone have a backhoe, right? But if it's moist, you can do that. And they're just basically saying the land of our lives is always ready for planting and then therefore reaping. It's always ready because God is doing this in our lives. He's not mainly talking or only solely talking about agriculture. They were in captivity, probably their grandparents and their parents, and some of them were in captivity in Babylon for 70 years. Part of the wordplay and the irony of it is when God told them they were headed off into captivity, specifically 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, so all around Jerusalem there. When they were headed off into captivity in the Babylonian Empire, one of the things he said is that you did not let the land lie. And so 70 years, you did not basically do what I told you is don't work every day. Don't take everything from the land, but allow the land to have a Sabbath. You take a Sabbath, let the land to have a Sabbath, and there's this whole thing. And he's like, 70 years, in part, is because you didn't do that to the land. Why did they not let the land breathe? Why do you work too much all the time? It might be because you're disorganized, and it might be like, well, if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it. If it's going to be, it's up to me, which I've looked everywhere in here, isn't in there, okay? It is not. When we rest, when we cease laboring and we praise God, He is still working. It is a way to honor Him and to worship Him and to know that God meets my needs, not just I meet my needs. And you can say, well, it's easy for you to say. Well, it wasn't easy for the people of God to say, because then they head off to captivity where they don't necessarily get definitely any days off for sure. They don't own the land. They don't have any investment other than the good of building a culture. And when they came back, guess what happened to the older people? They wept because they were home and the temple was in ruins. Everything was in ruins. And so they have this joy and this sorrow. We get to begin again. We have to begin again, right? And that is the cycle of the Christian life, not just their life. They were rescued from captivity and a life of scarcity and entered into a new life again of freedom and fullness. Let me say that again. They were rescued from captivity and scarcity. You don't have the resources you need. And brought into a life of freedom and fullness. Now, again, I say those words like that because that's the points that I'm saying of this psalm. But it's also the way in which the author says it. Now, I'm not going to get into the original, but in verse 4, when he says, restore our fortunes, it's like restore our captivity. When we were here before, we didn't realize how good we had it. And then we left, and we came back, and we realized with God, we have it so good. We're not constrained by God. We're free in God. There is a type of captivity in worshiping Christ that obviously cuts off all the other options of how to live. What you spend your money on, what you spend your time on, what you do and don't do. It cuts off all of those things. Life is much simpler. And you might think it's not as exciting. I say it's full of laughter and full of shouts of joy. That is the kind of captivity that is actually a fortune, that is actually rich, that is full of life. And that is the life that Jesus invites us into. Go to the New Testament, the Gospel of John. John writes about this man who came. He was the Word, and the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. I know that's not the verses up here just in a moment, but, right? And he was with God, and he was God. The author of all things stepped into the story, and here's what it says, verse 14 of Gospel of John, chapter 1. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Let's pause there on verse 14. You like camping? You like camping? Okay. Is anyone willing to glamp? Okay. Camping and glamping both count. Okay. You're like, how close? Water source, that's great. I bring my own. How close is the Wi-Fi, right? Or how close is the power, things? On our summer happenings, we have this river family camp, end of July, beginning of August, right? And it's kind of glamping, right? There's power there, there's a lot of protection, whatever, but it's also camping, right? It's dirt, right? It's very dirty. When it says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, he pitched his tent. He moved into the neighborhood. He came camping with us, okay? He entered this same life that we have, and we have seen his glory, glory as the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Talk about your mouth's filled with laughter, your heart's filled with joy. They're like, God came to live with us. And making no mistake about it, this writer, John, tells about another John, we call him John the Baptizer, bore witness about him, verse 15, and cried out, this was he of whom I've said, he who comes after me ranks before me because he was before me. He's eternal, okay? And then now this applies to all of us, verse 16. For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Let's stay there on verse 17. Why write it that way? What is your default posture to the law? You're driving down the highway, or you're a passenger, and you're like, we're going too fast, or kids, I know some kids who go, whew, 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 just to, you're just watching the thing. I have been driving a Tesla for 2 days. So one of the men in the church borrowed it. Our car went down. It's being fixed. You said we could drive your car. Could I actually do that, right? And so I show up, and it's like, whoa, it's not mine. I'm not coveting it, but I'm very much enjoying it. Okay? I'm not asking for a Tesla. I'm good. All right? Just don't touch anything. Kids, don't touch anything, okay? But they can see on the screen how fast. Let's see how we get to just speed, 60. Was that less than 2 seconds? I think it was, okay? I think it was. Should we try it again? Right? This morning I'm driving in, see a state trooper, and I immediately look. And I'm not speeding. Had I been speeding, 2 boys behind me would have gone, whew, 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 right? I mean, they're very awareness. But when I see the law, I'm good. Or does the brake that's like not the brakes, it just kind of coast. You're like, we're good, right? And in those cases, I don't know what's going on. I could probably interview someone here. Like, they probably don't want to, they're thinking of other stuff, right? They don't want to, just stay color between the lines, stay in your lane, do your stuff, right? If you just do what's basically required of you, they'll stay off your back, okay? Now, I'm not making an overall statement about the law, okay? I think there's some great things. What I'm saying is that is how our posture is often when we think of the law of God and therefore God. If you just obey, God will stay off your back. If you just obey, it will turn out well for you. And then what happens? You get sick. There's unforeseen circumstances, whether debt or relational strife. And you go, actually, this of like, if I do the right thing, it will all turn out well for me. That's not in here either. But that is the default mode of the human heart. And knowing that, this John and the other John are like, by the way, that's wrong. For the law was given through Moses to a redeemed people in telling them how to live. They were already accepted. They were already rescued. They were already saved. And then he told them how to live. Not, they lived a certain way, and therefore they got God's blessing. Because you could look at that, the Old Testament, and go, that's how it is. And you're like, actually, have you read the story? Because they never did what he said. I mean, even Moses is like, I guess I don't get to go to the promised land, right? So there's like that default mindset is not in there. I mean, it's the mindset's there, but that emphasis is not in there. But it's always leading to the greater story. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Why? Because Jesus Christ came and lived under the law, fulfilled the law, and brought us to God. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Verse 18. No one has ever seen God, God the only Son, who is at the Father's side. He has made him known. So if we go back to verse 16, I want to camp here for a moment. For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. It's a fun study if you just look up fullness in your concordance, which is the back. Filled, fullness, full. Look at the New Testament thing, and you're just like, wow. All the fullness of God dwelt in him bodily, Colossians. And we are complete in him. Wow. There's many other scriptures. What does that show us? God does not want us to eke by in this relationship with God and with one another. Just kind of like, well, just maybe next season it will be better. No, he wants us to be able to be as his kids, filled with laughter, shouts of joy, saying God has done great things, just talking about it, and then expecting him to do great things. And then, in the midst of our adversity, saying, restore our captivity, restore our fortunes, O Lord, like the streams in the desert. We need to see it again. Verse 5 and 6, I believe, teach this truth that our Father will make us fruitful, free, full, fruitful. Our Father will make us fruitful, verses 5 and 6. Psalm 126, verse 5 and 6 in the ESV are this: those who plant in tears will harvest with shouts of joy. They will weep as they go to plant their seed, but they will sing as they return with the harvest. Simple word picture. Like, yeah, you go and plant your seed. You come back in the harvest. It's the law of the farmer, of course. What if when you sow your life with good in God and the harvest doesn't happen 3 months later, but it's 3 years, 30 years, maybe beyond your life? What happens then? You weep as you plant your seed, but you're waiting to be able to sing for joy at the harvest time. A few weeks ago, I was describing to this elderly couple as we visit them that I was trying to make this special. I was trying to get this wood for this Father's Day project for Kids Craft, right? And Abby, our kids director, and I had talked about it, and I was like, I can source wood. It's easy. I mean, there's wood everywhere, right? And I was going to go to a mill, and they had these cutoffs, and then I visited, and Bill Blackburn goes, no, I've got something for you. It's better. And I was like, okay, what do you got? He goes, go out back, buy my wood miser, which is a mill. And he's like, there's a black locust post. I want you to take that. And I was like, oh yeah, totally. I know what you're talking about. So I go and I walk around and I'm just looking everywhere. And I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. It's obviously a post, so it's not a living tree. And he goes, it's waterproof, it's rot-proof, it'll be there. It'll be gray, right? And so I go, bear with me here, right? And here's the top of the post, okay? And I know what a black locust tree looks like when it's an infant, because that's why my sons have machetes, because we just kill them, because they are invasive, and they have spines everywhere, and you just like, right? The power company, they spray them at various places because they take over, right? And I was like, how did you tell me the story about this post? Now, it's 8 feet long. I'll tell you where the rest of it is in a minute, right? He's like, oh, yeah, we cut that down and put it in well, it's hard, yeah, as you can see. We put that back there 40 years ago. It was up on Tulico, this property that they have. And I was like, oh, the property that burned down in the 2020 fires? And he goes, I don't want to talk about it. Okay. Right? He's a logger, he's an educator, now retired, still does all those things. 3 years ago, he was still climbing trees. Okay? Just, this is what we're doing. Okay? We're just like, don't tell us about it before you do it. Okay? Just come back. Right? He doesn't do it anymore. Right? But he wanted to get it, and he goes, that'll be the hardest wood that you'll ever try. You'll break your saw. And true enough, it did. Okay? But tell me the story. And he goes, well, we cut down all the black locusts that we could because it's just going to take over. But I knew that I needed a nice straight post for this logging rigging to show kids, to teach them how logging works. So this is for the high line, so forth. And he goes on to all the things, and my eyes are glazing over. And I was like, I know I've heard this story. Are you listening, kids? You know, and it was so wonderful. And it was not in use at that time. It was just sitting there. And so I go out there, and I'm just reaming on this post. And I come in all sweaty, and I bring him the post. And he goes, yes, the top is gray, and the bottom is black. Okay? So I was like, all right, so here's the bottom. Okay? And the bottom is black because it's not rotten, but this is earth around it, right? And I was like, how does this thing not rot? And he goes, it's built that way. When it's young, it's all spiky, and that's how it keeps, right? That's how it stays alive. I like, didn't know about my kids' machetes, okay? But they still grow back up, right? It doesn't rot, so forth. So, I don't know how to describe this. Your father, you got kids in the kids' class today. They've been working on a project for you for 2 weeks. I don't know about the artwork on it, or you can read it, or whatever. That is not the point. This coaster will break the tile in your house if you drop it. It is so hard. I try to have my boys help me sand it. It's just like, that sandpaper is not going to do anything, okay? All those kids have pieces of the gray. They get larger as it goes. All right, some of them are sealed with polyurethane. It's waterproof. It doesn't need anything, right? It's a token of their appreciation of you as dads, okay? But you're like, I don't have a kid here. My kid's all grown. Therefore, the part of the post that's in the ground. When Bill Blackburn gave it to me and I walked into his house with it, and he goes, oh my goodness. And he's like, that post has never been in a house. You know, he makes a joke, right? And I was like, he's like, make sure you cut one for me. And he calls them biscuits, right? Cut a biscuit for me. And so a few days later, I came and I brought him 4. And I said, here are 2 that are above ground, they're gray, and here are 2 that are below ground. And you know what he did? He cried. It wasn't the tree that's an invasive species or whatever. Is that he and his wife had poured their life into their 3 grown kids and their 24 foster kids and their whole community. And they can't leave their house anymore, and it's just people come visit them. And their countenance is full of joy. Why? Because they have Christ, and their mouths are filled with laughter, and their tongues with shouts of joy, because they rehearse. Every time you see them, they rehearse God's faithfulness, and it's not rote. They were like, will you pray for me for my headaches? And also, let me tell you what my great-great-great-granddaughter did, kind of thing. And it's like, that's how you grow, right? So if you're not going to be presented one of those biscuits, coasters, today, your kid isn't in kids' classes today, come up. I've got one for you. I got a whole bunch of them. If your kids are grown, you get one of the ones below ground. It is rot-proof. It's hard as a rock. Psalm 126, verse 5 and 6. In fact, Tanya, I didn't control them. Will you put up the pictures of the Blackburns here? All right, this is who we visit. Bill and Gail. In the next photo. So the background is the map of where it came from. If you could get there, you'd probably be shot in rural Clackamas County, but not by them. It's just a lot of things happening out there, and that's me bringing back the 4 biscuits to it, and that's his workshop. He still works out there and makes stuff for people. And then the next one is me cutting all the biscuits on the neighbor's saw, saying, "Hey, by the way, my saw just kind of didn't like these. Could I use yours?" Said, "Oh yeah, it's yours," whatever. And I was like, I brought my own saw blade just in case, And his 40-year-old Delta did the job. It was good. All those stories aside, a couple questions and a final scripture, and we come to the communion table. Why is a fruitful life a happy life? And what I mean by fruitful, why is a life that involves sowing in tears and reaping with joy, why is that the happy life? Not the escape of the tears, but the inclusion of that. Why is that a happy life? And more pointed for all of us, is this the kind of happiness that you are experiencing in God today? Meaningful purpose, rehearsing naturally, like this is just the vocabulary of what we talk about in our home. Not every moment. You can watch the World Cup. Go Team USA, great. That's awesome. That's great, right? Because this is the kind of life that Jesus lived. We went to Gospel of John chapter 1. Here's chapter 12. Verse 23, and Jesus answered them. They had some questions for him. They said, "We wish to see Jesus." And he answered them, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." Jesus was the Son of God, but every time he referenced himself, he called himself the Son of Man, which, by the way, is a downgrade. But he identified with us. And he called himself that, the Son of Man to be glorified. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. Talk about sowing. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. You don't get the fruit without the sowing. Whoever loves his life, loses it. Whoever loves his life loses it. And whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. If anyone serves me, he must follow me. And where I am, there will be my servant also. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. Right? Why do we obey? Because God has accepted us. Why did Jesus obey his Father? Because this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. And out of that, not only acceptance, but that joy and that purpose, that happiness, came his obedience to God our Father. And then he says, now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour, but for this purpose I have come to this hour. Setting aside black locust tree posts, we get to participate in a special moment, all of us. as God's kids, we get to come to the table. We get to respond with a meal with Jesus, our brother, who said, I eagerly desire to have this with you. Right? And we get to turn in little bits of a tree, connection card, or a scrap of paper. I'm going to write my prayer requests on that. Our offerings, we put them in the 3 boxes here. But more than that routine, let's come. Let's grab the cup, right? We stack them. Let's grab the cup, the bread, the juice, and let's hold on to it. And we'll have a moment during this next song where we rehearse God's faithfulness to us, every blessing, and then we'll partake together. So if you are a believer in Jesus, or right this moment want to become one, we invite you to this table because Jesus Christ has given his life for you because he loves you. And he wants you to have shouts of laughter, sounds of laughter and shouts of joy over your heart and your circumstances, but mainly over your heart. Let's pray.